So we're going to work on this prickly cactus motif, and the original has a lot of a pink terracotta for the vessel and the background. So we only have a couple of colors and shades of colors. So I've mixed a whole bunch here because we're going to use a lot of it. And we're going to start with the greens first. I'm going to come in here and just follow these lines here, kind of like ribbons. I took the inspiration from an artist who went to Morocco, and she posted online this as her personal photograph, and it really was cool to me. So I sketched it up and made it into a motif that I could paint. So that's where this came from. And so that's a lot of yellow. So I'm going to come in here. This is the tropical set, and that was like parrot mixed with the tiki brown. So I think that's why it came out like that. So I think this will be really nice to just put on top of here and add that extra layer. And I think actually that'll improve how that light green looks. Getting some of these edges right now so that I don't end up with my lines showing. And you can just kind of guess where they're at. It's fine. I just use them as a reference. And so now we'll work on our vessel a little bit, and we'll get a color. You've got a strip in your take and paint. You should have one so that you can kind of guess. This is kind of a terracotta type pink look. You can make your vessel whatever color you want. This is just my example from that photo I was telling you about. I mixed some sunset and tiki, which is like a pinky red and a brown. And I'm just kind of adding this to wash over. I'm leaving some white of my paper in here. And if you want it to be more crackly, you can kind of push some of that pigment into the water and do more of a wet on wet. I'm covering the whole thing, and I'll come back in and do the details. I'm going to grab some of these little edges here so there's not white of the paper between there. And I think I'm going to dab a little water into that to get a bloom like so. I'm going to let that dry, and now I can come in and start doing some of the greens and just not put my hand in it, which I'm famous for doing. So we'll come in here and find these other little lines for now. And it may look a little stripy at first, and that's okay because we'll go back in with a few more layers. If you want to be a little more detailed, we'll do that. I'll show you how. If not, you can just paint it solid green with a little shading and it will still look pretty cool. I'm not squeezing any water into this, just my brushes can kind of take some of that water off. So we've got some basics here. We'll come back with more layers of green in a minute. We're kind of working back and forth. Now you can see where I added that water. The bloom is where the water has pushed the pigments and minerals out to the outside edge and created this cool kind of look. If you don't like that, I wouldn't do what I just did. Now I'm going to come in here with my darker color. It's kind of that pink terracotta, and sort of put the ridges in here. Now to practice, as I always show everyone, do a nice fine line with the small tip of your brush, because if you let your hand go down, it will not have a consistent line weight. So you want to be able to practice, and you really want to use your brush more like in a marker stroke rather than in a painterly stroke. You can pull toward yourself. I'm filling this whole thing in, so it's okay if it's fat, and I'm dragging my hand, and then I'll come in and fill in that detail at the end. Hopefully that's dry enough to come in here and hold that line. And see, I've got the white there. I'm going to turn it around and use the very fine edge of the tip of my brush to get that filled in so I don't go outside the lines. This will be the same color on the background, so if you do mess it up, it's fine, because you can just incorporate that into your background later. Okay, so now I'll come along here and kind of deposit a strong line here, going over that bloom a little bit there, and while it's still wet, I'm going to move some of this pigment away from that line, like so. And I really want to catch that pencil line there so that you don't see it. And I'm going to do something similar over here. You do want it to look dimensional, so of course it's going to be a little brighter in the middle and a little darker around the edges. I'm depositing. You want to learn some pigments, so if you want to learn how to do like a crackled look, you can look at my ivy plant demo, and even though it's a different motif, you can get the idea on how to do that. And got a different color in there. Now that's still a little dark for the middle. It's starting to buckle just a bit. This painting is probably going to end up buckling because I didn't tape it and size it for all the outside water I'll be putting in, and that's fine. And now take a clear brush and just kind of tap across some of those white areas to fill them in, as if you may have seen that in some of my other videos. I'm going to darken that line a little bit. Now this is a little less pink than my original, but I do like it with the terracotta and brown together. So while that's drying, I'm going to come up here into my cactus and just add a little more of a darker green. You'll still see the yellow underneath. I don't want to cover all of it up, but it's okay if I kind of run my brush over it. This is pretty watered down. That way you can see what's underneath there. And I'm picking and choosing to kind of put my brush down at certain places and deposit, and then pick it up so that I get a more inconsistent line and some deposits of the minerals. Now that, I don't really care for that being so centered, and I'll go in and kind of mess up that stark line in there. All right, so while that is drying, again, I will come into the bottom area here, and I'm going to get some darker pigment. This is made for a matte, so it doesn't have to go all the way to the edge. And now I'm going to do just kind of a wet wash here, pulling some of that line so it gives that fuzzy look. See how it's strong, and then as I kind of scrub my brush to the edge, it'll start to flow, the pigment will start to flow into where the water of my brush is. Let me add a little bit of this brown in here. And we'll go back in and put a little bit of a shadow at the bottom there. We'll just leave that be. And now I'll show you how to do the background. I have this bigger brush, the medium, and it has a nice fine point to it, but it's got more width to kind of get some water around the edge. We're going to be careful not to lift any of that paint into our background. You may have seen me do this in other demos. I just put a thin layer here. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. And I don't want to do the whole paper because it will just dry. It's too hard to keep working. And so I'm using this same color. I'm going to add some of this brown to this pink and see what happens. I'm kind of just depositing actually away from my vessel for right now. There is water everywhere, but I just want to be sure that I get the right amount of pigment so that it is lighter than my vessel. And you can decide if you want your strokes to go vertically or horizontally when you lay them down. You can see those started to kind of cement themselves in that place. So I want to scrub at them, as I don't really want that line to be there. And now I'm going to go just for a second closer on that vessel, but we'll go over and do that later as like a shadow, so we don't have to worry too much. You can leave the white of your paper in a few places like here so that it looks like stucco and it's got that porous effect to it. Want to be careful. We just painted our cactus, so you can either go and do something for a little bit and let that dry is the most ideal, but if you're impatient or you're doing a video like this, you might want to just keep working and try not to get that into your painting. Well, to get the green into the background of your painting. Okay, so I'm going to lay down some more thin water here. I can see it better because I have a little bit of that color I'm using in the background. I'm leaving a little bit of the white of that paper. And I'm kind of moving directionally right and left and swirling only because I don't want to have any distinct horizontal lines on this one. When I'm doing a sky, I for sure want them to be horizontal, and in this case, I want my strokes to be random or maybe a little trending toward vertical because it's a wall. So you see, I'm kind of leaving some white of the paper, and you can always go back in and smooth that out. It doesn't even have to go all the way to the edge. It can just be an impression of a background. Now, with some care, I'm going to grab my other brush and just go around this with a little more detail. And you're welcome to start with this brush and get that close to there and then move to the bigger brush to do what I just did. I don't want it to look like a line all the way around there, so I'm going to keep kind of moving that into the pattern I already had. And it's kind of buckling and lifting a little bit. That's fine. Nothing a little glass won't fix in a frame. Okay. So, looks like I got my hand in some green over here. And now I'll go near this vessel on this side with some water. And I have this black in... I have some of this black in my bin here, but if you have the tropical set, you can use ocean and hibiscus in a mix to see what kind of shadow black or a darker version of Like sometimes people take that color and add a little bit of a dark to it to get a nice shadow color. So it's in the same family. I'm going to come in here. It's a big vessel, so I'm going to make the shadow on this a little bit wider. Actually, it would go across here. Not so big in the front. The shadow would go to the back. Just kind of fill that back in. Just kind of incorporating that into the background so it's not too stark. You don't even have to add a shadow. I don't have that in my original, so just showing you what you can do here. And so that it isn't so stark of a line, I can kind of blend that in so it's not as obvious. And I really lost my line here when I did that, and I should not have pulled that across there, so isn't the best look or technique.